Perfect, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Arvind. Yeah.
Yeah. Good afternoon.
Ma'am, we are live, please.
Shri Arvind Singh Ji, Secretary, Ministry of Tourism, Government of India. Srimati Rupinder Barar, Additional Director General, Ministry of Tourism, Government of India. Shri Rakesh Kumar Verma, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Tourism, Government of India. Dr. K. J. Kumar, Additional Chief Secretary, Tourism and Civil Aviation, Government of Sikkim. Shri Shekhar Shukla Ji, Principal Secretary, Tourism, Culture and Public Relations Department, and MD, Madhya Pradesh Tourism Development, Government of Madhya Pradesh. Shri Mukesh Kumar Mishram, Principal Secretary, Tourism and Culture, and Director General, Tourism, Government of Uttar Pradesh. Shri Vishal Kumar Dev, Principal Secretary, Tourism, Department, Sports and Youth Services Department, Government of Odisha. Colleagues from FICCI and the industry, esteemed panelists, and all of you who have logged on for this webinar on sustainable tourism, confidence to explore India responsibly. Namaskar to all of you, a warm welcome, and a big thank you for joining us this afternoon. The travel, tourism, and hospitality industry has been hit very hard by the pandemic. The last 16 months have seen the closing down of many industry stakeholders and huge job losses. In fact, the industry is struggling to sustain itself. So this initiative of sustainable and responsible tourism is extremely appropriate. The government has done some relief measures, but it will take a long time for the industry to revive. We appreciate the Ministry of Tourism's announcement of free tourist visas for up to 5 lakh tourists. We request that there should be no end date as proposed, which is March 2022, since international movement has still not started. We also appreciate the financial support extended to the travel and tourism stakeholders under the new loan guarantee scheme and the additional financial support through the ECLGS scheme and the credit guarantee scheme. This will give relief to the industry, which is facing a huge liquidity crisis. However, we request that the repayment tenure be increased from 6 years to 8 years. That is 4 years moratorium and 4 years repayment. The opportunity to restructure loan stroke debt is also welcome. Here again, we need the window to be extended by another 2 years. That is to achieve the recommended ratios from March 2022 to March 2024, and the payment of the principal from December 2022 to December 2024. This will really help the industry and will help us to sustain ourselves so that we can then go ahead and contribute in the longer run to the GDP of this lovely country. We are hopeful that the SEIS scheme will get implemented very soon. And as I said, in the long run, for the industry to continue to remain sustainable, it should be granted the infrastructure status and be included in the concurrent list of the Constitution. This is the right opportunity, friends, for the implementation of the appropriate policies and practices for sustainable and responsible tourism. Sustainability needs to be an active element of every tourism stakeholder's operational strategy and business model. The destination has to benefit from tourism, and the local communities have to be involved and employed. Responsibility is the onus of the tourist. They have to follow the safety and health protocols. Ladies and gentlemen, we are happy to have with us dignitaries from Sikkim, Madhya Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, and Odisha, who are leaders in sustainable and responsible tourism practices, and they are going to share their knowledge with us today. Vishalji, who has changed the face of Odisha tourism. FICCI is honored to have been partnering with Odisha Tourism on several tourism initiatives. We are also honored to have partnered with UP Tourism for the promotion of tourism, and we look forward to the continuous guidance and support of Sri Mukesh Kumar Meshramji. Needless to say, we have to focus on the health and safety aspects of tourism. The government and stakeholders have taken all precautions to implement the safety protocols, but we need to raise the awareness to boost the confidence of the consumer. And we ourselves have to be responsible consumers. So we need to follow all the necessary protocols that have been put into place. We may have seen some scenes coming onto social media of various tourist destinations where people are just not following any norms at all. There are no masks, there's no social distancing. Now, this is irresponsible, and we all need to be aware of how we ourselves can be responsible tourists in our own country. I'm looking forward to an interesting webinar because sustainability and responsibility has taken a new turn altogether. What we discussed 2 years ago is irrelevant now, or 1.5 years ago is irrelevant now. We have to now change the dynamics of tourism altogether, of hospitality. What is it? What is expected of us as stakeholders? And how can the government support all of us so that this industry remains sustained and is able to contribute? I'm delighted to invite Sri Arvind Singh Ji, Secretary, Ministry of Tourism, Government of India, to kindly give the keynote address. We're grateful to you, sir, and the Ministry of Tourism for the support that has been extended to our industry through these last 16 trying months. Thank you so much for being with us today. Sri Arvind Singh Ji, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Jyotsna Suriji, Sri Mandeep Soin, Mr. Deepak Deva, other office bearers of FICCI, my colleagues from the ministry, my colleagues from the various state governments who are online, ladies and gentlemen. We are all aware of, the crossroads that we are of this pandemic, which we have been going through for the last 16 months or so. And the first wave came, we saw, the impact of that. Then the first wave went down and we saw some revival of domestic tourism in certain parts of the country. And then the second wave, which was even more vicious and troublesome than the first wave, hit us. The cases are going down, but still there is apprehension of the future as to how the virus will behave, whether it will come back in terms of a different wave or a different mutant, and how the vaccination, the pace at which it is progressing, how fast will we be able to vaccinate a considerable section of the population. So these are all uncertain times and, times that we are, as they say, very fluid occasions where one cannot accurately predict what lies in store. So I think this is a time to pause, rethink our strategies, and refocus and reboot and focus on areas where we have not concentrated earlier. So definitely sustainability of our entire tourism sector is something that has been brought to the fore in the last few months. We have suffered huge job losses. We have suffered, closure of lots of businesses. We in the ministry have been trying to continue to support the industry through dialogue, through taking up issues with the various ministries, and some measures have happened. So there are, even though these are uncertain times and we need to focus on the issues of sustainability and responsibility, there are certain positive signs that are emerging. We are seeing green shoots of revival of domestic tourism again. The recent announcement of 5 lakh free visas for the first 5 lakh visas is an indication that there is serious thinking of opening up of travel for international arrivals soon, as and when, the behavior of the virus seems to be, not very vicious, and when the vaccination program continues and establishes itself successfully, both in the country and abroad. Of course, coming to the topic of sustainability, there is a very special relationship between tourism and environment. Tourism is an activity where the consumer travels to the producer and the product, which leads to a special relationship between consumers, who are the visitors, the industry, the environment, and local communities. The close and direct relationship between visitors, host communities, and the local environment creates a sensitive situation whereby tourism can be both very damaging but also sometimes positive for sustainable development. We've been seeing some pictures recently of the damaging impacts of revenge tourism in certain parts of the country. Responsible tourism is all about making better places for people to live in and better places for people to visit. Responsible tourism requires that operators, hoteliers, governments, local people, and tourists take responsibility and take the necessary action to make tourism more sustainable. Sustainable tourism focuses on what people, businesses, and governments do to maximize the positive economic, social, and environmental impacts on tourism. It is about identifying the important issues locally and addressing them, clearly reporting progress towards using tourism for sustainable development. The COVID-19 pandemic that we are all discussing has forced the tourism sector to shift its focus to resilience, sustainability, and interconnectedness among all the stakeholders in the sector. Last year, the UN WTO published a strategic guidance for a responsible recovery of the tourism sector, recommending ways to support responsible recovery from the current situation and to build a better tourism sector. It outlines 6 lines of action: public health, social inclusion, biodiversity conservation, climate action, circular economy, as well as governance and finance. The diversity of these topics illustrates the major trend in the sector and a recognition of the necessary coherence and cooperations between representatives of different social and economic sectors related to tourism. The tourism sector's cross-cutting nature means that sustainability trends present in any relevant industry can and should be applied to tourism. That is why the global trends of clean energy, green buildings, and sustainable waste management are examples which are also reflected in tourism. At the same time, consumer demand for sustainable practices in tourism is growing, prompting the sector to respond. Therefore, more needs to be done for sustainable tourism. Many tourism destinations have been embracing sustainability and taking action to address the environmental impacts, but this should be more universal. Similarly, businesses in tourism, large and small, have introduced environmental management systems, but their application is sporadic, not very systematic, and not universal. Certainly, more needs to be done for mainstreaming sustainable tourism. We all know that tourism has also been included as a goal, as a target in the goals 8, 12, and 14 on inclusive and sustainable economic growth, sustainable consumption and production, and the sustainable use of oceans and marine resources, respectively, in the SDGs that the UN talks about. The tourism sector is also a significant user of non-renewable resources and a generator of waste and pollution. Areas of notable concern include levels of food waste and the use and disposal of plastics. Action is required to reduce consumption and to refurbish, reuse, and recycle materials through the value chain. Therefore, national and state tourism policies should recognize sustainability practices and the sustainable development goals in the vision and strategic direction for tourism. This may require a rethinking of the indicator of tourism success, away from visitor volumes and towards more holistic concepts of value and impact at the destination level. Now, with all this in mind and the pandemic in the background, we have, or you are maybe aware, I've discussed with various stakeholders that we have come out with a draft national strategy and roadmap for sustainable tourism. And we have asked for comments from all the stakeholders, associations, and state governments and other interested individuals. Some of the measures that we have proposed in the strategy are a certification scheme for sustainable tourism, where we can cover accommodation and tour operators initially based on a sustainable tourism criteria of India. This can later be extended to destinations and other industry stakeholders as well. We will also work with industry, states, and NGOs on information, education, and communication campaigns amongst the stakeholders about sustainable tourism and the adverse environmental impact of tourism in certain parts of the country. There'll also be an effort to do a state assessment and ranking, which we have seen successful in certain aspects of where the national priorities are concerned. So this will be a key strategy to motivate states to adopt sustainable tourism. This will be used to identify the status of various initiatives in the states and build their capacity and future more roadmap towards better sustainable practices in tourism. We will aggressively promote sustainable tourism certified products and enterprises to encourage others to adopt the same, highlighting good practices in marketing and through some award schemes. We will also ensure environmental friendly initiatives in destination and products being developed under various schemes of the ministry, such as Swadesh Darshan, Iconic Destination Development, and Prachar. States and industry will also be encouraged to follow sustainable principles in developing destinations and products. No such strategy can succeed without public, private, and community partnerships, because especially in sustainability, the private sector and the community have a very important role to play. The strengths of the private sector in areas of marketing, operations, product and experience creation, quality assurance, and finance will be explored and harnessed to develop and spread models of sustainable tourism through mutually beneficial partnerships, where we will also try to involve the community at large. We are aware that most of the action for this will be at the local level. So we need to involve the cities and destinations. So lots of the practical activity in pursuing sustainable tourism can best be taken at the local destination level. Or some actions include sustainable transport initiatives, for instance, the provision of walking and cycling routes, smart mobility initiatives like e-vehicles, e-taxis, and e-cars, local anti-pollution campaigns in water and recycling, schemes with the hospitality sector. So we will work with the state governments and local governments to promote such action at the destination level. And of course, here is something where I can see some of the office bearers of the Responsible Tourism Society of India is that these earlier what I have mentioned are mainly supply side interventions. On the demand side, we need to make the traveler aware of sustainable and responsible tourism. And we will work with the Responsible Tourism Society of India in promoting a campaign for the responsible travel. So I've tried to highlight the importance of sustainability, how we need to have a relook at where the current state of play in the tourism sector, and the draft strategy that we have come out with, the key elements of that, and what we seek to achieve with that. I would request all of you to give your comments, which we will finally incorporate when we come out with the draft strategy. And I'm sure today's deliberations, where important stakeholders from industry, from the state governments are all present, will give us a sense of the direction in which the draft strategy can be molded. With these words, I thank you for giving me a patient hearing and giving me an opportunity to deliver the keynote at this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your leadership, Singh, and thank you so much for your time. In just a few months that you have been at the ministry, you have resolved two of the most critical issues that we had faced. That is, first thing, of course, was the SEIS. I can tell you it's a lifesaver. And then we had 500,000 visas that you got approved, which is a very generous scheme. I think FICCI will work with your ministry on opening Incredible India. We will work closely with you and partner with you on that. And thank you so much, Singh, for your time today. And thank you for setting the stage for the discussions this afternoon. More importantly, I must confess, we are very grateful to you for your focus on sustainability. This is an area that we have all been working very closely, and FICCI is going to take the lead on this and are committed to driving sustainability in tourism. So thank you so much for your time.
May I log off because I have another VC to attend to?
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming in, Ji. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good. So we now move on to the first session this afternoon, the session on sustainable and responsible tourism experiences. I have the great pleasure to introduce Mandeep Soin, Mandy as he is widely known. Mandy is a mountaineer, explorer, environmentalist, and he's done a lot of interesting things in his life and is a great storyteller. He founded IBEX Expedition, an award-winning adventure and luxury travel organization in 1979, a pioneer in the field in India. His expeditions have spanned all 7 continents, including an international UN-supported environment expedition to the Arctic to study ozone depletion in 1989. In 2008, this is actually a very important movement in tourism. In 2008, he was the co-founder and founding president of the Responsible Tourism Society, and now we have the pleasure of having him also as a member of the Inbound Tourism Committee at FICCI to drive sustainability as a subject and to contribute his experience to FICCI tourism. So Mandy, welcome. Thank you for hosting this session. Over to you.
Okay. Am I being heard? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
Thanks, Deepak. That was wonderful to be part of this very rocking organization of FICCI, which I was sharing with you and Jyotsna earlier, that lots of good initiatives under the umbrella. And of course, I'm delighted that you all have chosen to focus on responsible tourism, because as we all know, post-pandemic, it's a demand that is also thankfully coming over from the potential consumers of tourism. And so that is a happy trend, I think. To this regard, I think the fact that we've got some real heavy hitters from the state governments and from the Ministry of Tourism, it only makes my job easier to really come down to some level of a strategy of what we might consider, what are the sort of challenges and the opportunities in terms of making sure that sustainable tourism happens on the ground. Over the journey of the last 40 odd years in the tourism sector that I've been, obviously there have been some fabulous examples and there have been some heart-wrenching examples of bad practice. So what we want to do, even with the concept of the sustainable tourism criteria of India, is to increase the good and decrease the bad. That's the overall sort of ethos of the sustainable tourism criteria of India. So with that, let me first get in our young joint secretary from the Ministry of Tourism, Rakesh Verma, who I know also needs to leave at some point. So why don't I get him in and let me briefly introduce him. That he's joined the ministry since Jan of 2020, and he's a 93 batch IAS Punjab cadre person who did his graduation in computer science and engineering in IIT. And this is important because one of the comments I'll make, you will be able to join the dots. Now, he looks after niche tourism, and he's been driving things like the drafting of the new tourism policy and so on. And I think he's also been a believer in technology and using that as a tool for deliverance in many spheres. And of course, he's being Punjab cadre, he's had some ground level experience in Kapurthala and Patiala in dealing with municipal levels. So I think, when I was, and we've been working closely with the RTSI in the ministry, I like the fact that he was always driven to look for a solution-based kind of a scenario, because we can all write good papers, we can all espouse good concepts out of a stage, but how do we actually implement, I think, is the key challenge. So Rakesh, why don't I get you in and request you to give us in about 4 or 5 minutes what you think is the crucial aspect of what is being done vis-a-vis sustainability. And I'm delighted to hear that Arvind just mentioned that you will take on the Responsible Traveler campaign, because obviously there are three pillars. There's government policy, there's industry good action, and there is the traveler himself. And now hopefully we are traveling, we are tackling the traveler. So would you like to explain to us what are the things that are happening and how you feel confident that some of them will actually get implemented on the ground? So may I invite Rakesh to hold the stage?
Thank you, Mandeep. Thank you for a very generous introduction. I think most of the points that we have put in our strategy have been covered by Secretary Tourism, but I'll quickly make 5 points. The first point is that we all must agree that the future is sustainable tourism. Unless we accept, unless we have a shared vision that that is our future, our efforts will not really be commensurate. So I think it doesn't need much of research. What we have seen in the immediate background of pandemic, even before pandemic, the need for sustainable tourism was there out in the open. And particularly with this agenda 2030 of sustainable development goals, sustainable tourism, and in our strategy we have mapped out not only the 3 goals but all 17 goals can be sustainable tourism can make a very significant contribution. So that's very important for all of us to note that it aligns with multiple fronts, and so we must be convinced that this is a goal which is worth pursuing. The second is also to recognize that we are very poor or underperforming in sustainable tourism. If you look at our ranking, either as WTCCI ranking or adventure tourism ranking or ecotourism ranking, in most of the places, we are not performing very well. So that acknowledgement, that acceptance of reality is also important for us to really put together the efforts which are required. The third is, things will not change on their own. If we expect that only by, talks and what is probably some realization somewhere things will change, it will not happen. It will happen by policies, by programs, by strategies which are put into practice. So that's where our national strategy is driven, and we hope all states also align themselves to specific policies and strategies. Even if you have policies and strategies, unless you measure how effective they have been, so the measurement of your action, your strategy, your policies is another important aspect that I would like to highlight. And that's where the sustainability tourism criteria of India, right from whether it's tour operators, whether it is hotel industry or destination. So looking at continuous measuring, then only you will realize where is the gap, where we stand, where is the future aspiration. So that's what the secretary talked about, the state ranking, the assessment and sustainability criteria. The fifth is industry must be enthused about it. We can't achieve sustainability only by just, regulation or very hard kind of measures. So what do we do to make sure that it's a win-win proposition for the government, the industry and people at large? So we must look at making industry as a partner and making sure that they are equally enthused about pursuing this goal. And the last one, which is very favorite of yours, is the Responsible Traveler campaign. Unless people start demanding, unless the people start valuing it, probably the supply side, the governments, the industry will still be somewhere laid back, complacent. So how quickly do we galvanize people also that they also get aware about it? They start demanding it, they start seeking it, and they also start paying for it. So that's also important. So these are the 6 points which I think are important going forward to make sure that we make substantial progress on the agenda and we effectively implement this agenda. Thank you, Mandeep.
Well, yeah, thanks for that, Rakesh. And may I just ask you that do you think that in the campaign that we are talking about to educate the traveler to become more responsible, could we also, make sort of campaigns through international travel organizations, which essentially, asks for educating the consumer? Therefore, it is not just the Indian domestic traveler, which is step one, but tomorrow when markets open up and we have the international traveler, you also get a mixed bag there. So wouldn't it be a wise idea to actually look at both national and international organizations and ask them to really make campaigns that educate the consumer? Because basically, as you know, the industry responds best to the consumer. So if the consumer is asking the right questions or asking the industry to do X, Y, Z, hopefully things will fall in place. So would you put a shoulder to that kind of pressure as well?
We are already discussing with the United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, and they are very keen about it. They themselves have set an agenda for restoring ecosystems. So it falls in their priority for the decade. And also, let's say, looking at the organization like Global Sustainable Tourism Council, GSTC, they are at the forefront. They were also promoted by UNWTO and other organizations. So we surely are looking at international partnerships and affiliations, because then only our message will be loud and clear. Our customers are everywhere across the world. So whatever we are doing, whatever messaging we want to do, it has to be at a scale and at international scale also. And we would be happy to partner with some of these organizations to really take forward the agenda.
Okay, great. I know you want to
Yes, another
probably.
important meeting with the secretary. So
Do you need to
thank you, and you have been quite an inspiration for the ministry. And hopefully, this World Tourism Day, we should launch your Responsible Traveler campaign in a much bigger way. And
Thank you.
I request all my colleagues from the states also to support us in this Responsible Traveler campaign, which we will be formally launching on World Tourism Day. Thank you.
Thanks, Rakesh. That was the best jalebi you've given us today. So wonderful. We will enjoy it. Okay. So with that, I think we will move on to our next speaker. I have a glittering list of wonderful tourism secretaries who we need to now let's look at Sikkim in the east and invite Dr. Jayakumar, who is actually the additional Chief Secretary of Tourism and Civil Aviation in Sikkim. And he's a mechanical engineer from the College of Technology in Coimbatore. And of course, he has also a PG diploma in management from IIM Bangalore. And he's done a PhD as well. So we are very happy that, all these what we think are complicated aspects of sustainability should come really quickly to you. And you are a 87 batch IAS officer who've also been in the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. And you've also been the Vice Chancellor of the Sikkim Manipal University. So this is all wonderful, Mr. Jayakumar. And tell us, I mean, it was very impressive. I've been to Sikkim a few times. We've done some wonderful trekking, and it's a paradise for, ecotourism and so on. The fact that Sikkim declared itself as an organic state, what was the impact on the tourism industry, do you think, or the tourism experience once Sikkim was declared as an organic state? Can you sort of capture that? Was it something that stands out as a strategy that was a great help to tourism? Or what are your thoughts on that in the next 2 to 3 minutes, if you can?
Yeah. Okay. We have a lot of exciting things about Sikkim. We all know that Sikkim is a Himalayan state, the greenery, mountains, and a lot of attractions. In fact, people just come to enjoy the nature and serenity and the tranquility of this place. Of late, rural tourism has picked up, very well. In fact, we see a lot of youngsters, groups, coming and staying in the homestays. And there, we see that the government has also stepped in, and then it is now standardizing the services that are made available at the homestays. The Chief Minister has come out and announced a mega homestay project. And when we talk about tourism, we know that agriculture, farmlands are there. And alongside the homestay, we also have introduced the concept of farm stays. We have recently been Ukray is a cluster. We have a number of rural clusters, and we have these rural tourist facilitation centers who also help the tourist in getting information about various homestays. And of late, we are also trying to develop some capacity in the homestay owners and managers to advertise and promote their the various their local destinations, the cluster as such, and also tell them how to reach the place and so on. Now we also have invented, we thought, just rural economy, tourism is just one arm of the livelihood dimensions if you take a household. So what we are also looking at is, how do you introduce some kind of some aspects of food processing, or like ginger, cardamom are all very even corn is very well grown in many rural areas. So how is it that we can add another value dimension? And even if you look at the cultural value, we wanted to introduce traditional games like archery. There are the whole archery competitions. In fact, we have sent a delegate for the Olympics, Tokyo Olympics, and a lot of things, which are not usually available in other destinations in other states. For example, maybe bird watching, a bird park, flower shows, organic vegetable competitions, going in the paddy field, in the terrace farms. And also we have come out with, we have uniquely designed for mechanized farming. We thought volumes are all very low. In rural areas, if you see, the production is on a very low volume. So what we thought was we will introduce a little mechanization, and then probably even vertical farming, hydroponics. So these are all technologies, emerging technologies. So how do you equip the rural folks with these kind of technologies, and then have pilots, and then successful experiments done, and then once it becomes successful, of course, it gets replicated and so on. We also are looking at promoting campsites, for example. People who come from outside the country, they are very used to camping and all that. Camping in the rural countryside, near the mountains, etc., would be very exciting. Trout fishing competitions, for example. Why could we not hold a trout fishing competition? Ethnic food festival. The village headman throws a party in the village community where he invites the local, the tourists who had come and staying in the cluster, and then organizes a evening gala event.
Mr. Jayakumar,
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
Can I then at this point ask you, when you have all these wonderful initiatives happening, and possibly the promotion of organic food and local food, and the symbiosis between the agriculture and the consumer, which is the tourist, do you in a strategy have anything like the minimum criteria for a tour operator or a minimum criteria for a hotelier, which is kind of in sync with the sustainable tourism criteria of India? Do you use any principles of that inside your approval system, so that on a long term, the industry is acting kind of in a harmonious, sustainable manner? Is there any strategy like that?
We have a roadmap for that. For example, we have just started with the awareness and building of capacities and so on. We will slowly introduce some kind of competency assessment dimensions. In fact, in the recent Okire Congress, we have released, the Chief Minister, in fact, released the Homestay Operators Manual. Homestay owners, managers, operators manual. So which gives the basic tenets of how to run a homestay, what are the essential aspects that you take care of, the do's and don'ts, what are the kind of, code of conduct for the people, for the guests, and also for the owners and so on. So we are probably at the beginning. So down the line, when a little more capacity gets built in, we can introduce more like, competency rating, assessments, and so on, and bring them, probably give them some kind of an award for the best performing clusters and so on. So it is all in the pipeline. Plus, one major thing we have done is we have started our reforms with the Act, the Sikkim Registration of Tourist Trade Act itself. We are amending. Now we are bringing in all hotels, homestays, everything under our banner. Sometimes, licensing gets done by urban development, the municipal corporations, and tourism department is only a facilitator. So all that is getting now brought under the single umbrella of tourism and the civil aviation ministry. And incidentally, the Pakyang airport is a very big boon now too. It can bring tourists by air. Only thing is, of course, the climatic challenges, and sometimes, tourism. There are also other challenges. For example, the army. Of course, challenge in the sense, we have to also respect that they also operate in the territory. And sometimes when you do paragliding and recce operations and mountaineering and so on in the higher altitudes, we do require the army help. And then so there is a army coordination and so on. Yeah. So
Okay.
that's it.
Thanks. Thanks, Dr. Jacob. That's a good insight into some of the nuggets that we have. What we are also planning at the both at the FICCI and the RTSOI level, where we are going to work quite closely, is actually capture some of these wonderful best practices that we've already got within India, on responsible tourism. Because sometimes it so happens that one state doesn't know what the other is doing, even if there is some good practice happening as a neighbor. So that's something else that we want to facilitate as a mechanism. So thanks very much for sharing your wonderful ideas, including I love the trout one because I'm a fisherman myself, and one day I hope to come and make a cast. And I can tell you that is a great idea and nothing fishy about it at all. So thank you very much. And may I now invite Mr. Shiv-Shekhar Shukla, who's the Principal Secretary in Tourism, Culture and Public Relations from Madhya Pradesh. He's the IAS officer of a 94 batch, and he does include in his experience work at the rural development with the Zilla Parishad. And he's also been involved with the wetland project of Bhoj. So there's some hands-on experience from the sort of sustainability and responsible tourism aspect. And of course, you've been involved with Manrega and a slew of other responsibilities, which includes education, food, and a slightly unsustainable aspect which is necessary, but how you do it is mining. So come and explain to us, Mr. Shukla. I know we knew your predecessor quite well, Mr. Rao, and I know that the RTSOI actually worked quite closely with you. In your state, we launched our first workshop. And indeed, when tiger tourism came to a stop, we had an international conference in Bhopal and lots of interesting churn of ideas that took place in your home state. But may I ask that at this point, what do you think is the obstacle? Because I know you all are very keen to drive the sustainable tourism agenda, and you have in fact been in contact with our society. What do you see as the main obstacle in making MP the real sort of jewel in the crown, as it were? Because you've got all these magnificent national parks, but you've also got huge opportunities. So would you like to share with us in the next 3 or 4 minutes what your challenges are first?
Thank you very much, Mandeep, for inviting me to this webinar on a very important and relevant topic, sustainable tourism. I'm also thankful to Shri Arvind Singh ji for addressing us, Shri Rakesh Verma ji, Jyotsna Suri ji, and our esteemed co-panelists, Jay Kumar ji, Vishal Kumar Dev ji, and Mukesh Meshram ji. Of course, as we all know that post-pandemic, the things are being looked at differently. And all of us now in the hospitality sector, whether on this side of the table or on the other side of the table, we do know that we are paying a heavy price for the planetary excesses. And there is definitely a sudden shift when it comes to the choices of eco-conscious travelers from luxury to authentic. And while tourism department has to work continuously to enhance the footfall in the state, but at the same time, now the time has come that we take certain measures which ensure that there is minimum carbon footprints while enhancing the footfall in the state. As you rightly pointed out, that Madhya Pradesh, although there are so many hidden jewels and is a treasure trove for people who love nature, who love raw, rustic, and remote land experiences. This is much more exploratory in nature, Madhya Pradesh tourism, than anything else. So in Madhya Pradesh, we definitely know our USPs, as you rightly pointed out, that having the highest forest cover, best of the national parks, best of the, resorts over there, benchmarked with any of the international place. We do have these kind of places where people would love to come and rejuvenate themselves, especially post-pandemic scenario. And having understood well that what direction tourism is going to take, we have taken a very firm step towards making responsible tourism as the main plank of our tourism policy.
Oh,
And
good.
we have tried to devise various tourism products around the concept of responsible tourism, which leads to community-centric, inclusive, regenerative, and sustainable tourism. To name a few, like my colleague from Sikkim just mentioned, we are also doing in a big way rural homestays, where we will be working very closely with the communities and making them owner of the assets which they create, and also partners in enhancing the tourism potential of the state. At the same time, we'd like people to come and experience that rustic and very simple and minimalistic way of life which a rural person has, which is the sustainable way of life. So we would like to give that kind of experience to travelers in Madhya Pradesh. We being an agriculture state, we are also working on certain agri-tourism products, which would be unique and would be integrated with rural homestays, so that the person has the holistic experience. Having said that, as you understand that Madhya Pradesh has all those features of tourism, which the future is going to take a new course to. We just need to highlight these features, and we are doing that. And we do have certain handicaps like connectivity issues, etc. We are working very closely with Government of India and other related departments to see that the connectivity issues are resolved. And people, in fact, love to travel by their own vehicles. And now the era of, neighborhood tourism has come, pass tourism. So we are focusing on our neighboring states like Uttar Pradesh. My colleague is there, Mukesh is there. There's a huge catchment over there. People don't know much about Madhya Pradesh tourism potential and the destinations. We are working to enhance people awareness about Madhya Pradesh in Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat, Maharashtra, etc. So these are the ways.
Sorry, Shekhar, can I make a small interjection? And I'm afraid I'll have to transition into a rapid fire mode because we've got two more speakers. We're running out of time. We've got to close our session at 4. Can I just ask you one or two quick questions? Would you have challenges like solid waste management issues at, say, resorts or hotels within, Madhya Pradesh? And is there something that you are thinking that you might be able to do? And is that something that if you have an evolved system, could we then share that practice with other states? Quick if you can give us an insight.
Absolutely. Under the responsible tourism, we have a very strong vertical now dedicated to this solid and liquid waste management. And especially in the national park areas, we are working very closely with the concerned departments of the state government and also the stakeholders in the national park areas to provide very good, viable solutions for end-to-end waste handling solutions. And I'm very happy to share with you, MP is now known to have the cleanest cities in the country. Indore has been declared as the cleanest city for the last couple of years now. Bhopal is the second cleanest city in the country. So there is now, awareness and ethos where people are generally very much compliant and they understand the necessity of safe hygiene environment. So it is all the more easier for us because the basic environment building has been done. So we are now creating, solutions where we reduce or we move to zero waste kind of a situation in our national park and sanctuary areas.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. And I beg your pardon, we are not finishing at 4. We are finishing at 4:15, our thing. So may I squeeze in one more question to you, which is to say that, just like we heard Arvind and Rakesh talking about various strategies, which obviously they will expect the states to take forward. The idea of, just instituting a lot of carrying capacity studies, is that something that you all will have a budget for within the state governments, or will you approach the ministry? Because I remember being part of a small committee that was looking at the 12th five-year plan. And we said, yeah, iske liye, please keep a budget, because it's so important. And it's not just wildlife sanctuaries and parks. It is actually your monuments. It is actually wilderness areas. It is actually the honeypot destinations that we need to do some carrying capacity stuff. So is there any thought in that regard that you would like to institute, or indeed, as a gut feel, what do you think? Would it be something that you can handle at the state level vis-a-vis finances to cover it, or would the state center be able to help you out?
No, it's a very good idea. In fact, we in our country have been lagging much behind in carrying out these kind of studies, which would go a long way in sustainable tourism. We, in fact, understand that Madhya Pradesh, in fact, has USPs of having high value, low volume tourism in any case. Our tourism destinations are not very much crowded. But having said that, so I would definitely like to embark upon certain kind of structured framework where we do have these kind of assessments of carrying capacities of all our tourism destinations. And in fact, we would like to work with Government of India or some like-minded organizations to help us in carving out this kind of study parameter.
Okay, thanks very much. Now let me move on to our next speaker, and that is no other than young Mr. Vishal, who I've had the pleasure of meeting in his home state in Orissa when you organized that wonderful conference of state governments at the fabulous sort of beach camping that you initiated. So he's the principal secretary to the government sports and youth services in Orissa. And he also graduated in 1990 with a degree in computer science, which is and he has an MBA to boot from IIM Lucknow. He's worked a few years in the corporate world as well. So he has a good sort of sense of, systems, both in the government and outside. And he's helped, establish Bhubaneswar as a major IT hub and, of course, a sports capital of the country. And they've also got a Responsible Tourism Award already at the 6th India one. And as I was mentioning, the eco retreat in Odisha, which you did, and I know right now, as we speak, you have engaged Ernst & Young to do an ecotourism, plan for you. And Ernst & Young are partners of ours where we are giving the sustainability input. So God willing, you will take that on carefully and implement some of those things that we are recommending. But just to ask you some of the questions that are going around, and perhaps you can tell us that, if the Responsible Traveler campaign was to come, would Orissa be, quite a keen partner in taking that forward to both your domestic travelers within Odisha? And would you be okay in terms of, because we've told the ministry to develop a smart app, which will actually allow you to take photographs of good and bad practices by anybody. It's, and they can send it back to the government, they can send it back to RTSY, etc. Now, do you think on a practical level, would something like this work with, either fining institutions or, people? Is that likely to happen, or do you think there's some other strategy needed? Just your gut feel reaction again.
Mandeep, of course, it was a pleasure meeting you when you were in Odisha here for that summit that you spoke about. To answer your question, you see, it seems to be a very good idea. The challenge, I mean, you are giving carrot, you're following carrot approach, rewarding people, but also penalizing them wherever they're going wrong. But I think enforcement becomes a huge challenge. We've seen that in our approval programs, and we've also adopted a master plan based approach now. Earlier, we were, doing piecemeal work, a road here, a sewage treatment plant somewhere. But now we have adopted a very integrated approach as far as our destinations are concerned, development of our destinations. And there, disposal of solid waste, liquid waste, sewage treatment plants, etc., is very important. But the challenge comes when you have a large number of people coming as day picnickers. So one has seen at some of the most beautiful places, people come and litter. So in fact, just this morning, I was having a meeting with our forest secretary and revenue secretary regarding how this can be controlled and what kind of mechanisms can be put in place. And we thought the best way forward for tackling this would primarily be to make the local community responsible for ensuring that the standards defined are enforced. And they will have some say in collecting, getting a share of the fines that are collected. I think that it's a brilliant idea. It's the need of the hour, and I think it is doable.
Okay, thanks. There's another thing that I've always thought, which we've actually proposed to the Ministry of Tourism, that every state government must have an ecotourism board, or as we may now want to call it in the future, the Responsible Tourism Board. And I know that Orissa already has it. In fact, I was delighted to be there to present when you guys were forming it many years ago. But my fear is that of the 4 or 5 governments that have this board, it is obviously a combination between the state forest department and the tourism department. And it's a pity that sometimes the two departments don't work as closely as they ought to, because I'll give you a fantastic example of Madhya Pradesh. And, I'm just hoping that Mr. Shukla is still there and he can hear this, because when they formed the board, we came up with this wonderful idea of going down the Chambal River and actually talking to the Chambal dacoit families. And it was done with the Ecotourism Board of Madhya Pradesh. And the idea was that, look, our funda was, let's give them tourism, let's make them into guides, because the Chambal River is so biodiverse, rich, it's amazing. And, they will hopefully leave their guns. So, it's been tried in Kerala, it's been tried in Nagaland, and it's happened. But unfortunately, the model that is there is that the forest department doesn't seem to have much money. And the tourism department that has the money is sometimes a little shy of depositing that money to the board for such activities. So I wonder, firstly, as a strategy, I think it's vital that we have a vehicle for the delivery of responsible tourism in India at the state level. And therefore, an institutional mechanism which comes together is wonderful. But beyond that, I think how much oil we throw into that working relationship and a teamwork would really, so given your experience with the Odisha Tourism Board, Ecotourism Board, do you think there is any need for us to oil it a bit further, or are you quite in a happy space to take some of these initiatives forward, and perhaps then based on that we can recommend to the other state governments?
Mandeep, I couldn't have been more delighted. This issue that you spoke about, the functioning of the Ecotourism Board, is something which we've been seized of late. And we've had, in fact, 2 meetings at the level of the Honorable Chief Minister in the last 1 month alone. So we've seen that, the basic problem that occurs is that most of these boards are kind of ex officio in nature. So maybe what we have said is that at the overall supervision level, yes, the additional chief secretary forest, the tourism secretary, etc., they could be also overseeing, but we need to have a full-time team which is part of this ecotourism board for carrying forward the agenda, because every person being an additional charge doesn't help. It kind of becomes more like a committee and not like a functional board. So we are working on a proposal of what would be the most appropriate structure. But one thing we're very clear is that it needs to have people who are full-time professionals in the board, on the role of the board to carry forward the agenda of the board.
Thank you, Vishal. May I quickly circle back before I come to our last speaker, to Mr. Shukla, that do you think we could infuse some energy into the Ecotourism Board of Madhya Pradesh? Because, this brilliant idea has been languishing. We've done 2 river expeditions, and one of them was with Mr. Sujit Banerjee, who is, currently the Director General of WTTC India, and obviously the former tourism secretary. And we all believed that it was such a wonderful idea. And you could showcase this to the world in general. If you have the same families becoming guides, and they can be, homestays and tented accommodation. And, we even spoke to the gentleman who made Bandit Queen. And he told us, because obviously the first question was, ki, Are bhai, what about safety issues? You're making them stay, as guest houses and all. They said, look, they are so proud, these people, that once you come into their region, it is their natural, outlook to look after their guest. And they will not, as they say, kisi ka bal banka nahi hone denge. So I thought it was a wonderful model. And if there's any way that you can infuse some, monetary support to the Department of Wildlife, who wants to train these communities and all, I think, MP can really make this like an international best example. So is there any quick thought on that idea?
Yeah, first of all, let me tell you that now Tourism Board and Ecotourism Board, as well as the entire Forest Department, we are working very closely with each other. And we do support a lot of their activities when it comes to capacity building and, any kind of initiative which they want to take. That is one. Second thing about the Chambal thing, which you mentioned, is very important. And we, with the help of Mr. K.K. Mohammed, who is ex-ASI man, who was instrumental in resurrecting Bateshwar temple group of temples, we involved him, and we are creating a dacoit museum there in Chambal. And also very soon you will have an occasion to have meal with a dacoit. You will be able to dine with a dacoit and listening their stories of those years. So those kind of products we are working on, and very soon we are going to launch those kind of things. Ecotourism Board or Tourism Board of Madhya Pradesh is one and the same thing. We don't differentiate, and we work very closely.
Okay, good. On a separate note, we will dwell on this idea, and I just hope we don't caught on a wrong foot on that one. But anyway, that's
There are no dacoits now. These are all ex-dacoits.
Yeah. Anyway,
Sandeep, if I can interject now. So,
Please.
The point that you raised about tourism department, forest department not working together. I think in the last 1.5 years, because of the pandemic, there's been a very strong realization that sustainability and responsible tourism is the way forward. And it's not just the industry. I think even the travelers are very aware and sensitive to the footprint that they're leaving as travelers. And therefore, there has been a sense of urgency in, doing whatever we are doing to be more responsible, more sustainable in our practices and in the way we provide tourism experiences.
No, thank you. That is absolute.
Yeah, it'll act as a competitive advantage, whether it's a country, a state, or a hospitality group. The internalization of sustainability and responsible tourism, so to say, would definitely add a competitive advantage to that nation, state, or organization, whichever be it. Yeah.
No, thank you. That is absolute music to my ears, despite a tight turban. That is wonderful news. Let me come on to our last speaker, who's been waiting patiently in Mr. Mukesh Kumar Meshram. He's the Principal Secretary of Tourism and Culture and the Director General Tourism of the Government of UP. Now, he's an IAS officer of 1995 batch, and he has completed his master's in public admin from University of Birmingham, where I bet he met more Sardars than he would have thought he would have, and a master of architecture from IIT Roorkee. And this is again wonderful to hear, because I believe that one of the very key and crucial aspects which responsible tourism doesn't look at is architectural harmony and best practices, which is why we've got huge issues, whether it's in the Himalaya or it's in forest areas and so on. But we'll come to that and specifically ask you, because you've also been an architecture lecturer at the Maulana Azad Institute of Technology. So I'm particularly delighted that with that experience, maybe you can field us a few questions on, for example, where I'm sitting in one of the states of the Himalaya, the Uttarakhand, and we always rue the fact that the vernacular architecture that is being lost to ugly constructions of glass and cement hotels and all. They've got a place, yes, but not necessarily in the sort of environment that they tend to come up. It's the same for wildlife lodges. It's the same for government constructions and so on. And at this moment, we are working on a paper on architecture. So so I have two questions for you. One is that do you think that the state of UP, where you are based and you can make a difference, would you like to take the cause of architectural harmony, at least in tourism sites, even if it is designing a dhaba or it is designing a kiosk? It needs to have a certain sense of place, which it needs to reflect. And could you, take that on? And would that be part of your thinking? And the second one is that given that you're a new entrant, lots of people expecting lots of good stuff from you, would you institute something like the Sustainable Tourism Criteria of India, which is based on those wonderful principles of, whether it's architectural harmony, waste disposal, all the good stuff, and make UP suddenly come alive from what it has been sometimes as a very overcrowded, tourism destination, which obviously has its pressure points. So over to you, Mukesh.
Thank you very much, Ficky, for providing me this opportunity to get involved with this webinar on sustainable tourism development. It's really a matter of pride and importance that we are having this brainstorming as well as thought process on the sustainable tourism development. And Uttar Pradesh is one of the most preferred tourist destination for both inbound as well as domestic travelers. And we offer a rich cultural heritage, religious, wildlife, adventure and sports, rural, handicraft and culinary. The current situation has resulted in various disruptions in almost every sector. The small and medium-sized enterprises in tourism industry have been affected the most. UP has been one of the most proactive and responsive state in the country in managing the COVID-19 situation, for which WHO has also appreciated the effort of our government. We are continuously working to make our destination safe and better. We want the travelers to be assured that the places where they are staying, eating and traveling to are safe and sanitized. For this, the government has formulated SOPs and guidelines for hotels, accommodation units, restaurants and tourist services. Then we have been taking numerous initiatives for branding and marketing of our destinations. We are in process of creating a photo shoot for our new projects or products and the 360-degree video of our unexplored destinations, so that people can visit virtually all the destinations which we have in our state. We are working towards the development of various tourism destinations such as Ayodhya, Varanasi, Chitrakoot, Mathura and other destinations under the different circuits also, like Buddhist circuits and various other circuits. We have identified 12 tourist circuits. We have also developed website pawanpath.varanasi.in, so that people can have virtual tour of many religious places, and they can have 360-degree visuals of all these places. As you have mentioned that architecture, obviously we should conserve, preserve our heritage buildings, and we must continue so that the sustainability of built up places or built up spaces also continues. And for that, in the vision document of Ayodhya, we have specifically tasked the designer and the consultant that it should have the basic elements and principles of uh, traditional architecture, Vedic architecture, and it should basically keep in mind the climatology of that particular area. Because what happens normally when we design new buildings and new architectural uh, constructions, we miss out all these aspects, and we don't actually do synergy with the surrounding or the particular culture of that area. So that way, not only in Ayodhya, but at least 450 places where we are developing tourist facilities, basic amenities. There also, we have asked the designers and architects to introduce the traditional architecture of that area. So particularly like in Mathura and Vrindavan region, the architect is doing or making all the buildings keeping in mind the architecture of that area. They are playing in stone structures, but all the buildings, old buildings or the surviving buildings, they are taking many elements from all those buildings. Same way, we are soon going to introduce a long stretch of Earth Ganga tourism, and around or on the banks of Ganga, we are developing Ganga villages. We are developing, and that is in the plan, so that we involve the different stakeholders. We would certainly like to involve the locals, the villagers. We will train them how to basically uh, get involved in these activities, and for that we are training them as far as our culture, history, and geography, as well as environment is concerned, so that they become part and parcel of our tourism industry, tourism sector.
Okay. Okay. So can I particularly ask, this is very interesting and heartening to note that you've obviously got a plan in mind, say at least for Ayodhya or a few other tourism destinations. My pointed question is that could we dream of a scenario where, let's say, you are walking in Ayodhya and the entire experience, whether it's, stopping at a little dhaba or a restaurant or something, there is some sort of an architectural harmony of knowing that at any point you are in Ayodhya. For example, let me give you a terrible example. When I went to Tibet, everybody knows about the Potala in Lhasa. Now, Potala is a beautiful monument up in this mountain, and it sits on a wonderful sort of hillock. But right around, unfortunately, there is barely any sign of a traditional building. This is all modern glass and all what you see in the rest of China. Coming back home, I'm deeply upset. And I was hoping that I could flag this to Deepak for his next session, that, if you look at the way our airports have been made today, it is wonderful that we've got so many airports and we've done pretty good, but they are all cookie cutter airports. I could land in, Chennai, I could land in Ladakh, I could land, or not Ladakh, anywhere else in the country, and I don't know where I've landed because they all look the same. It's the same glass and plastic, same glass and plastic. So that is what I mean, that when you're talking about responsible tourism in the overall, every aspect needs to be thought through. So I'm hoping that, with an architect inside you, and hopefully you will initiate some of these slightly unheard of scenarios where the tourist, has a very sort of a wonderful, seamless experience of knowing where he is, and architecture is, given that kind of a place, if possible.
Thank you very much for giving such a wonderful suggestion. We have our UP Tourism Policy 2018, through which we are promoting new tourist properties to come up in the state of UP. And for that, we are incentivizing them. Fiscal as well as non-fiscal incentives are being given to these units. So that aspect we can take care of, and we would certainly like all these units which are coming up, we will direct them or rather suggest them to basically design and build their units in such a way so that it matches with the local architecture also, and particularly the tourist destination which has been carrying the heritage and architectural elements of that area. Secondly, as you said, in Ayodhya, not only government properties, but we will regularize that the facade and even private properties which will come up in near future in the form of tourist facility centers or hotels or in whatever way, they will also be taken care of, that they synchronize and match with the architecture or what you have just suggested.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you. I think I'll need to bring this to a hard stop now because we are running out of time, but I'll just leave one quick nugget. The reason why Jaisalmer is so brilliant today, because some wonderful IAS officer decided that every building that was going to be made, newly constructed, private sector or government or whatever, they had to use the yellow sandstone. And in one master stroke, you've got a brilliant architectural harmony and a beauty that, I rarely see except for possibly Leh Ladakh, etc. So with that, thank you, and thank you to all our wonderful panelists. And may I now hand over to Deepak and Jyotsna to take the story forward. Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Deep, thank you on behalf of FICCI. Really would like to thank all the panelists. We'd like to thank you for hosting such a wonderful session for, I think, a very important subject. And on behalf of Mrs. Suri, the entire FICCI team, thank you very much to everybody for participating. This discussion is going to continue, and I'm sure we are going to have many more meetings and discussions around this subject to really bring sustainability in India in tourism at a very different level. So thank you so much, Mandeep, and thank you very much to all our panelists. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. Thank you.
looking at a sooner opening. And that's somewhere where our campaign is on, but we need a lot of support from the industry in reminding people that we could not be affording to be complacent even in our domestic trips, because if we do not manage the domestic traffic well in the weeks to come, then the kind of messaging is going to carry in today's world where social media is immediately available to anyone and everyone across, then we are not going to be getting the inbound tourist either. So these responsibility campaigns need to be thrown in where we still need to mask, we need to keep our social distancing, which is what is going to create confidence. So it's important that the domestic segment succeeds in the next few weeks. And that is a huge methodology for a messaging, which is again a very, very significant message to everyone that if we are able to deal with our own people in tourist places, then country is getting safe. So these are the kind of things that we are doing, trying to educate people. We've written to the state governments. We are kind of sort of on an edge, and we hope that the next few weeks are going to yield better results and we will not get into phase 3. I think that is critical. And that is what will really decide as to when do we truly open. But in the meantime, these are the kind of efforts that are on, and I look forward to hearing from all of you and probably making some last few comments.
Thank you so much for your remarks, Mr. Brad. Yes, it's going to be the next few months are going to be critical in terms of when to open and how to open, and with the vaccination, safety, all of that, which is going to be really interesting. There's a lot of work that you all have done and are ready for the opening of the destination, so that's the good news. So, good. I would now invite Kamal Hingorani to make his remarks. Let's hear it from the airline perspective. Do people feel safe flying? What did you guys do to make it safe and for customers and make them comfortable? Airline load factors, we just heard it's gone up to 60 some percent now. Do you see business returning? And I want briefly for you to touch upon sustainability at SpiceJet, which I know you're taking very seriously. So, Kamal, all yours.
Thank you, Deepak. At the outset, thank you, Fiki, and also support from Ministry of Tourism for giving us this opportunity. I work for a visionary called Ajay Singh, who's always maintained never waste a crisis and never a crisis of this magnitude. So like he walks the talk, we like to walk in those footsteps. So what we did during the COVID early stages was work very closely with the Ministry of Civil Aviation in developing all the protocols that you currently see adopted by all the domestic airlines in India, right from the PPE kits, etc. And we are happy that we've taken the lead, and Ministry of Civil Aviation, actually enabled them and mandated them for all the airlines. So what we also did was that simultaneously we put a lot of emphasis on technology and digitization. So what everybody wanted at that time was whenever we resume, it must be as contactless as possible. So we enabled an end-to-end contactless customer journey, which then meant that people should not, have to go to check-in counters. People should not interact with other human beings as far as possible. So we did e-web check-in, we did e-boarding passes, we did e-baggage tags, and everything was e. And that, those few months when the flights were down, 2 months and 5 days, I think we worked almost 8 hours a day virtually with the IT teams and all, and enabled something which was, something which wouldn't have happened otherwise, believe you me. I'll give you a small anecdotal thing. You all have been traveling through domestic and international airports in India, and you all know that our security guys always like to stamp the boarding passes. We are the only country on the planet that gets a stamp on the boarding card once you've cleared security. I have personally tried to work on this with BCAS, with MOCA, with everybody over the last 15 years. Why do we need it? And every time it was no, for security reasons. Thanks to COVID, it's gone. for once. And we are now, along with 200 countries of the world that, follow the same protocol. So we achieved, I think, quite a lot, and we really didn't want it to go waste. It didn't stop just at the airport experience. In flight, we ensured that we have what we call in-flight entertainment system is something we redesigned redesigned internally to make sure you bring your own device, and there's a lot of content which also has a menu, etc. So you don't have to touch a physical menu card. We stopped accepting cash for food and beverage on board. It was only debit or credit cards and things like that. So automation not only helped us in making sure that it was contactless from a COVID perspective, it also supported our cause of sustainability. Everything became paperless. Today, I can proudly say that 70% of SpiceJet offices are paperless, which probably is the best in the given times in India at this time. Deepak asked me about other efforts that we've done on sustainability. So I think the biggest thing we used COVID was that we developed what we call a blueprint of deploying sustainable aviation fuel in India, which probably couldn't have happened in normal times. And we engaged with World Economic Forum over the last 1 year. I personally spent an hour every week virtually with McKinsey and World Economic Forum and another 15 stakeholders to develop what is a 70-page document, which was formally released by the Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas in April. And fortunately, there's a task force comprising private and public stakeholders. And what this blueprint talks about is, the feedstock availability in India. This is for sustainable aviation fuel, because ultimately, the biggest change that aviation needs to bring about to reduce carbon emissions is sustainable aviation fuel. Even though India contributes less than 1% to the carbon emissions, but because optics of aviation is so strong that we found that if we lead it from the front, it has a geometric impact on a lot of other industries. And there was this case study that was done on India where they talked of technological pathways and policy recommendations for the regulatory bodies. And we're very happy that both Ministry of Civil Aviation and Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas have accepted it well, and we are well on our way now on a monthly task force. So this is something which may bear fruit maybe 5 to 10 years, actually 5 years from now, when we see more SAF being produced in India for all airlines. And this came from at the SDG Climate Summit of September 2019 on the sidelines of UNGA, where Ajay Singh was invited to speak, and that's because we had done the first biojet fuel demo flight. We are the first airline in South Asia to have done that in August 18, where he announced that we must have a target. So let's target 100 million passengers in 2030, domestic passengers who will fly on SAF supported aircraft. And that was a target that was subsequently accepted by World Economic Forum. And that's what we are now working towards. And we are very happy that, various ministries in the government of India have also graciously accepted that target and said, we'll completely support you. Deepak, you asked me on load factors and all. We had touched 60% traffic. I'm talking of only domestic way back in February when the first wave had subsided and we thought COVID was behind us. Unfortunately, what we saw in May was a disastrous situation where we only had 10%. We used to have 4.4 lakh passengers daily pre-pandemic, and we came down to 40,000 passengers in certain days of May, as we all know. Fortunately, last weekend, we've come up to 40% of pre-pandemic again. We flew 1.7 lakh passengers last Sunday. Midweek becomes less, weekend becomes much better. And when we were at 60% of the traffic, the active COVID cases in the country were under 10,000. If I use the same logic, we are at 40,000 odd today. We should be at 10,000. I'm an optimist. I'm a born optimist. Hopefully in 2 to 3 weeks. August, I'm expecting 60% pre-pandemic traffic domestically. 70% in September, barring so many ifs. And I would love to see Christmas at 100% pre-pandemic domestic. And it's possible because vaccination has played a major role. Rupinder rightly mentioned, vaccination is one of the most important aspects for getting tourists and others to fly. And I'm assuming that vaccination will only enhance. Coming to international traffic, that's something that will really depend. Again, Rupinder explained it better than I would. That depends so much on how people find India safe. But I still feel that international will pick up by Christmas this year substantially, definitely from nearer 4 to 5 hours of flying time, less long haul. And 2022, by summer of 2022, we should be close to some sanity of pre-pandemic international as well. And these are my personal, very optimistic figures, basis, as how I see the industry progressing.
Yeah, thank you, Kamal. Interesting to hear it from a airline's point of view, because you really truly have the perishable product in your hand. So for you, it's it's been
life and death.
Yeah, a very tough time over the last few years. We figured that out. All right, let's move on to Kerry now. Kerry, I now invite you to make your remarks. How does Accor look at bringing back confidence to its customers? How has your experience been over this time, and how do you see this whole thing playing out for you and for Accor? You're on mute, Kerry.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
There's two approaches to this. It's my own personal journey and experience, having arrived in November 2019, managed to survive 2020, and then no sooner did we start feeling quite confident, bam, it came back again, and with a vengeance. I think this particular surge of COVID was much more violent than what we saw in 2020. There was a lot of personal impact. Last year I wasn't really aware of people who I knew that had become sick, but this time I did, and we also lost a staff member. So it was very, very difficult journey in this particular wave. Having said that, though, what we witnessed last year, and I think it's the resilience of this country is extraordinary. And what we did is that we put together a contingency plan. I mean, I think the first thing we all did was gather, our thoughts together as a leadership group and sort of said, okay, here we go again. We're back to square one. January, February, and March, we were having phenomenal success. Our occupancy, our RGI, it was fantastic. It was very positive. And of course, we're opening hotels this year too. We're opening a beautiful Raffles, the first Raffles in India in the middle of a pandemic, in Udaipur. So, we really needed to consolidate. And where we were so successful last year is that we looked at it in increments. We didn't look beyond 3 months. I think, to the point, it has taught us so much. It's taught us leadership, agility. Technology has played a huge part to play. Partnerships, looking at that safety requirement. And I agree, with that subtle message about safety. And last year, when we saw all of these scary videos, and I can only describe them as scary, of people in PPE suits with spray guns, and as you were walking into the hotel, and we were mortified. I was like, oh my God, you're scaring me. So what we did is that we needed to get that subtle message about safety, and we needed to get that back into the consumer and make it front of mind. We put together, a wonderful video with music. Travel and Leisure gave us an award for it. Thank you. But what it did is it said that we're doing everything that we possibly can, all of the protocols. We joined partnership with Bureau Veritas so that our safety protocols could get audited. We took everything very, very seriously, and I think that started to instill the confidence back into the consumers. And this is a massive shout out also to the airlines, because we introduced a welcome back program, and SpiceJet, you were a big part of that, your commercial sales team, as was Indigo and Vistara. And we needed to demonstrate that it was safe to get on a plane again, and it was safe to come back into hotels. We did over 125 trips and for meals. Bringing our clients back in and instilling that confidence. And we intend to do that again, to just demonstrate that, when the time is right, it's okay to come back. So we looked at, our first phase. So we called it phase 0 because we were literally back at ground zero again. The staff, absolute paramount. Accor introduced a Heartist program last year on a global level, where we were able to look after our ambassadors that work for us in our hotels. We call them our Heartist, and we looked after not just them, but we were able to give financial assistance so the whole family could feel that impact. Because when you look after your staff will look after your customers. And we needed to make sure that they were safe, that their well-being. So that was number one priority. And then the second step that we took was, obviously vaccinations, right? So big vaccination program. It's not something that you want to publicize, to be honest. This is about caring for people and making sure that they're okay. And we care enough of them to turn up for work. And again, when we do get to that level of where we have 100% vaccination right through our organisation, that will be part of our All Safe label. So that when you see that All Safe sticker, that it covers so many different elements, and having staff vaccinated is actually one of those. So combine that with technology, that then went into phase 1. We started to create, talking to our clients. We said, listen, if you have to venture out, because the wheels of industry have to keep turning, right? We will give you space so that you can work, with confidence and security and safely. And, so our message to, all of our customers was, when travel is inevitable, let us take care of you, because, we understand you have to get out, you have to travel. So that's what we did, in June, and it served us very, very well. And now we're starting to open up. We're now into begin again. And here it's now more about looking at, another stage of offers, technology again. So our Vivar program, which is a wedding program by Novotel. It's for those who can't actually make and turn up at a wedding. And so you can do exactly what we're doing now, streaming live, and Novotel will bring the wedding to your home and to your guest, which is an extraordinary technical achievement. So yeah, all of these sort of things. But if anything that I have witnessed is the tenacity, the willingness, and the resilience of this country to bounce back. And I'm like Kamal. I mean, I'm, praise be that phase 3 doesn't hit, but I'm very, very confident that if we can keep going at the way we're going, we've got a nice steady climb. And I'm like you, Kamal. I think 100%. If you know, by December, if we can keep going the way we're going and increasing those vaccinations.
Thanks, Kerry. We got to keep going. We have no choice, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So, yeah, interesting. The points that I could take away was, you know, subtle messaging. I think that's really the key, because you don't want to focus on what had gone wrong or what you're trying to fix. And I think Rupinder too did bring up the point about subtle messaging when they go out with their entire storyline. Also, I think you know, the focus on bringing back confidence. It's interesting to hear you say that too, because from a business point of view, you'd like to bring that to your customers. From a government point of view, they'd like to bring it to the wider audience that would travel, whether as domestic or whether as international. So yeah, it's an interesting point. I think one point that I may slightly differ is that at some level there is going to be a vaccination number that is going to give confidence to people. Like, for example, today's ad of SpiceJet said we are all 100% vaccinated. I agree with you. First, we have to protect our people, our key assets, the most important thing. But at some level, these numbers are going to, you know, they keep moving from vaccination to fatality to you know, all these kind of numbers. But we'll come back to that. Let me now move on to Rohit. Rohit, you have an amazing business model. Sorry, Kerry, thank you so much for your time. I should have said that. My apologies. Rohit, you have an amazing business model, an exciting company, and have some, you know, and have had some exciting times, I'm sure, during the pandemic as OYO. Tell us about the innovative ideas you came up with as a company during this pandemic, and what can we learn from your experience? How do you plan to give the clients also the confidence to come back to OYO rooms, which is all over, everywhere, different shape and form, a beautiful product portfolio, you know, all over the country. So, Rohit, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Deepak. Thank you. I must say that we are in very, very interesting times. Do we are damned and don't we are damned, right? So I think it's a time where it requires enormous maturity and judgment on the part of every stakeholder to make this reopening sustainable and really for the long term, because what we don't want is clearly any more waves of COVID. So let me start with that by saying that, and I think all of us have a big role to play in doing the smallest bit we can there, because frankly, people's desire to be out there is strong. Our desire for business to be back is very equally strong. I think the balance needs to lie somewhere in between, right? And I always remind myself that vaccine is plan B. The world has no plan C, right? So we need to make this one work. I will go back a little bit and just tell you simply more. Look, I think we are slightly different in the sense that we work with thousands of partners. So our scale is very distributed and quite different from maybe some of our esteemed hospitality peers that we have. But and that makes it quite complex to really sense what exactly is the initiative to be rolled out. And I think one principle we followed very early on is that the world has no playbook for this, right? If the playbook exists, it's probably somewhere in 1920s post-Spanish flu, and it's very hard to recover that playbook and look at that. So it doesn't exist, right? So use first principles, be very close to the ground, talk to partners, customers almost on a daily basis, right? And a lot of our insights have come from when we have done that. So personally, me and my leadership team talk to partners every single week extensively, directly, without any agency in between, right? For example, tomorrow I'm out 1 week in the field visiting places from as diverse from Ghaziabad, Meerut to Moradabad to Almora to Nainital, right? Idea is to get a pulse check. And from that came 2 or 3 very distinct insights on consumer behavior and what consumers are looking for. Basis covered, the sanitization program got rolled out all across sometime last May or April. So that was hygiene, and it became quite quickly hygiene for the entire industry. So nothing to sort of write home about. But interestingly, when we're talking to consumers last year, some of the consumers told us that, look, we want assurance that the room is clean, so please clean it in front of our eyes. Now that in hospitality is absolutely weird, right? That no customer will really like to see a room clean in front of their eyes. But think of this paradigm. Today, when you go to a hotel and you see a staff member cleaning the lobby, earlier you would have said they should have done it in the morning, right? Today you actually feel good about it, that this is being carried out. So the psychology has changed, and we launched a product called SBY, Sanitize Before Your Eyes. And we rolled it out across thousands of partners. And interestingly, what we started seeing in data was that every hotel which is tagged as being enabled to do SBYE just got more customers, right? So people saw that tag on the app and came, right? Now, this is truly, and honestly speaking, I remember this meeting we were having, and Ritesh was also there, and we were saying that this is, should we do it, not do it, because it's not usual. But then said, this is what we are hearing from partners and customers. Let's do it. Let's develop the product and take it out there, right? The second thing which we is again a parallel is and this is all of us, not just me. We truly believe that vaccination is the surest path to stability, right? And the speed of vaccination. Now, in a network of our size, how do we make sure that that we incentivize that heavily, right? So, look, on the employee side, we move rapidly. We have about 75% plus of our entire employee force already vaccinated first dose, and I'm quite sure about 100% will get done within the month, right? But on the partner side, it's far more distributed. So what we did was we said that every partner who's able to tell us, right, self-certify that they and their staff members are fully vaccinated, or at least one dose vaccinated, not fully vaccinated, we will give you a tag on the app saying you are a vaccine aid property, right? And that will signal to the consumer that they are walking into a hotel where everybody they are interacting with is one dose vaccinated. On the other hand, we spoke to consumers and they said, will this make a difference to you? 87% consumers said it will change my decision if I knew that I'm walking into a place where people are fully vaccinated, right? So one was the right thing to do. The other thing was consumers are clearly telling us that they want to be in that zone. Today, just in 3 weeks, 4 weeks flat, 2,500 of our hotels are vaccinated, tagged, which means that every employee in that 2,500 hotels of ours today in India have got first dose vaccination, and that number is improving by few hundred every week. Right? On the business side, we are seeing the revenue generated by those hotels per occupied room night, RevPAR, is 40 to 50% higher than hotels which don't carry the vaccinate tag. Right? So there's a clear commercial benefit also to the partner, and we tell these human stories out, and others also get encouraged to join and do the same thing. Right? Now, I can go on. There are many examples of product innovation. So a lot of stuff around cancellations, ease of cancellations, vouchers which were valid for 6 months. Those are more commercial offerings, which I know we've done it. Many organizations have done it. But truly speaking, I think SBY and Vaccinate stood out as large programs which moved the needle substantially. Right? My wish and desire, we haven't done it yet, is and I see this every time I go to monuments or visit tourist places. Every tourist goes out, does not contribute to the airline and the hotel only. It touches 5 lives, right? At least the tourist guide, the dhaba wala outside the monument, right? It is really an economy. It is an economy flywheel generator. Every tourist, and not just restricted to the money which comes to the travel and tourism classical industry per se. Now the question is that how do we each take on the responsibility of saying to get that flywheel moving a little bit? So one of the things we are trying with is, can we attach a lot of local tourist guides to our hotels, right? Where they get some training regularly and some knowledge, because ours is, again, travel is a very local ecosystem in India. And last but not the least, I think this is truly, as we come out of this, is going to be first time Dekho Apna Desh, the really the, I won't call it the golden opportunity to do so, I'll call it the platinum opportunity to do so, right? Because never ever there is both a positive bias to travel within India and a inability to travel outside, which is so strong. So I think this is, I think it's ours to lose as a country, right? But we will not, because I've seen the determination and zeal which all of us have, including private sector, government, all our partners, to make it happen. So I remain very optimistic, and yet I remain a little preachy to my teams and employees and partners about COVID appropriate behavior, because that's just if they get bored listening to it, I'm okay, right? But I think it's okay to still talk about it 3 times a day. So thank you, Deepak.
Thank you so much, Rohit. That is wonderful. Really interesting ideas. So vaccination is plan B and there's no plan C. This is absolutely, this is for sure and very well said. One of the things that I think everybody in our business should know about is that you have to talk to your customers and partners extensively. People forget in lockdown and shutdown that they should not follow it. This is very good advice. Sanitize before your eyes. I mean, this is who would have thought, that you would enter a hotel and you'd want to see it all being done. So interesting approach. And what I found fascinating is that you said 40 to 50% RevPAR increase on with a vaccinate tag. My God, that just clearly shows that there is a direct proportion between RevPAR, vaccination safety, SBY, etc. So that's really the way forward for any hospitality business, whether it is probably anything. It could be airlines, it could be hotels, it could be restaurants, it could be even monuments. And I saw Rupinder smiling when you said Dekho Apna Desh, because in the pandemic, much of her time went in Dekho Apna Desh, which has been, I think, one of the most successful programs from the Ministry of Tourism and widely viewed. So yes, thanks so much, and thank you once again.
Deepak, if I make a quick comment on what he said very quickly. I completely agree with him on the vaccination, because, the day we announced that we are fully vaccinated, and this is not today's ad, this is about 2.5 weeks back, we were the first airline to do it in India. We suddenly saw an uptick next day in our bookings. So it has a huge, huge positive impact in aviation as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so true. And I got worried. I thought I read 2-week old newspaper today when you said that, Kamal, but you obviously had advertised earlier too. Thank you so much. I'm now going to invite Ranjit to join us. We would be very interested to hear from you about how Dubai is managing the recovery, the confidence in customers, and all that makes people flock to Dubai during the pandemic. I get friends sending me pictures and videos of going out, having dinner, watching football games. I mean, it seems like, hey, nothing happened where you are. You also have the expo coming up, lots happening in the coming months. Please share with us what we can learn from Dubai and your experiences in managing hotels in Dubai, in the Middle East. I think it's also important for us to hear, there is, of course, Kerry, and there is Rohit and Kamal, who spoke about the Indian perspective. But to hear it from where you are would be very interesting, and there could be some learnings that we can all take away. So Ranjit, over to you.
Thank you, Deepak. Delighted to be here. Deepak, I'm going to start with what happened in March 2020. And there's a proverb that I read somewhere which said, when the storm comes, some people hunker down and some others build windmills. And along with our ownership, we decided to build windmills. And we were one of the few hotels during that time which decided to stay open. So we haven't shut down at all during the pandemic. We remained open, and whatever we did or our strategies were sort of evolved constantly, and they were multi-pronged. So our biggest priority, as Kerry also mentioned, was protecting livelihoods. Obviously, we have a huge workforce over here. So what we did was we first of all in March when the whole pandemic hit, we gave them all vacation time, so they all stayed at home. Whoever could work from home was allowed to work from home. During this time, we also utilized it very effectively to do almost 500 hours of online training on the new protocols that were evolving constantly. And because we didn't shut, we had to be agile. We had to constantly listen to what the Dubai health authorities were sending out, the new SOPs. So that way we were, doing that online training with them. Also, because a lot of these, all of our associates were in their own accommodation, they were stuck, they were away from home. We created WhatsApp groups so that I could stay connected with them constantly. We did a lot of stress was put on mental health sessions. We did yoga online. We had our heads of department talk to them about their growth so that we kept them constantly engaged. And because we wanted to keep them safe and not go out, because a lot of our associates in Dubai, we provide accommodation for them. So a large chunk of our workforce works in the accommodation provided by the hotels. We even sort of send care hampers to their homes, to their accommodation, so that they did not have to go out and get groceries and things like that. During this time, quite a few of our associates were also stuck in their home countries because they'd gone on vacation and things were opened before that and they weren't able to come back. And as this lockdown came and it became longer and longer, we even decided to give them sort of sustenance allowances so that they could survive in their home country. That was one part of it where we were protecting livelihoods. The other thing was obviously, as a business, we needed to make sure that it was sustainable. We could hold on when occupancies had dropped to almost 4-5%. So we did the usual. We took pay cuts according to grades. We, did a lot of energy saving initiatives. We shut down floors, renegotiated vendors, sort of handled the cost side like that. Obviously, when the shutdown came, we also had a lot of guests who were still here with us, who were stuck, who couldn't go away. And so we were constantly in touch with them. We stayed engaged with them. And some of them who were stayed with us in March of last year are still staying with us. So they've decided to stay almost for a year, 2 years, and they've even booked for another year ahead, saying that this became home away from home for us. You kept us safe, you kept us secure. Why should we go anywhere else? So that was one part of how we got some great business. So the guests who were staying with us, because there was lockdown, you couldn't go outside. We created things like walking tracks for them. We customized all their food for them. Ghar ka khana was made for most of our Indian guests who were staying with us, and there were many protocols that were put in place and which was very well defined also by the Dubai health authorities with regards to sanitization of baggage, temperature checks, contact-free check-in, etc., etc. So all those things were done, and we even created, WhatsApp for Business, where our guests were constantly in touch with us for updates, for any requests they had, so that it was all contact-free. Also, there's always opportunity in a crisis. We looked at new revenue models. We looked at ways of making additional income at a very difficult time. So obviously, our delivery business took off in a big time. Also, a hospitality home with looking after laundry services, care packages, hampers that guests were sending from all over the world to their relatives here. So all those things were also done. What was really interesting during that time was the government over here was very, very proactive. They gave very detailed safety protocols. They were very well defined, and we were constantly in touch. And what was the best part was they used to check on it also to make sure it was being followed. So we used to have random checks by the Dubai municipality. They used to walk in to ensure there was distancing, masks, sanitizers, etc. So we worked very closely with Dubai municipality, with Dubai health authorities and stuff like that. Then obviously, while we were surviving through those days, then we were looking for the green shoots. And you come to the revival or the slight revival part. And June and July, we were cautiously optimistic. We saw a bit of occupancies going up, and the new normal became a way of life for us. And business started coming in. So as I said, the long-staying guests who were stuck here, decided not to go back. They brought their families in when a few borders opened. They decided to stay back here. The biggest thing that happened in Dubai was the IPL happened. So the IPL shifted out of India, came here in August, and we created for the first time a bio bubble was created because we had a cricket team that stayed with us. And during that bio bubble, there were new things we learned. There were new protocols that were put into place. And and when I think back, all our associates that we took care of during the survival stage went into that bio bubble willingly for almost 3 months themselves. But they couldn't go out, they were stuck with the team, and they went out of their way because we took care of them during the survival stages. Then what happened? The domestic market, staycations. We made the staycation deals a lot more lucrative, and domestic market started just booming. So that saw us through, Q3, Q4 for us, and then finally, after the Abrahamic Accord was signed, Israel as a market opened up. And Israel, when it opened up, it was like, wow, when this was a non-existent market that suddenly came out of the blue.
Okay, that's heavy for you, huh?
Masterstroke. And that came out of the blue with our relation that we had with Israel out of India. We worked very closely with them there. This hotel and both our hotels here did extremely well. So that sort of benefited. And then we also adapted. We suddenly had to figure out kosher food. We had to figure out all their various nuances. And it was a fantastic learning for us. And then we created our COVID Marshall program within the hotels, where they were sort of designated to ensure that the guests, the staff were sort of following all the various safety protocols. And then we went, in order to we created new policies to have flexible cancellation policies where either you canceled it or we gave them credit to be used for the next 6 months. So that was also, being very customer centric and making sure that they were looked after. A big learning point for us was the food and beverage. Food and beverage in Dubai during in the revival stage did extremely well. I mean, all the restaurants had very stringent protocols where you had to do sometimes 3-meter distancing, 2-meter distancing. You had to put dividers in between. There were at one point there were no buffets allowed, but then they later said, okay, now you can do buffets, but they have to be served. Stringent cleaning protocols had to be followed, masks had to be followed. So a lot of those things were done. A lot of emphasis was also on healthy food, immunity boosters, and things like that. So when we started looking at our whole offerings on F&B, by the time we closed last year of 2020, the revenue between rooms and F&B was almost 50%. And which was very interesting. And usually rooms to F&B is either 60-40, 70-30.
So Ranjit, is it would I be right in saying that you really didn't feel the impact of the pandemic as financially, or did you not feel it as much as a similar hotel would feel in India? Is that true?
That would be true to say.
Okay.
As an operator, for sure, yes, for the owners with their loans and the banks, stuff like that, they also did get quite a few waivers and deferments. But yes, but as an operator, we still managed. When we closed the financial year, we were still EBITDA positive.
Lovely, fantastic.
In
You're
a very,
amongst
very difficult year.
the lucky ones. You're amongst the lucky ones being in Dubai. So yeah, that's very interesting, and to hear that obviously there is a support. The ecosystem is far more. I guess they're more disciplined when it comes to taking orders from the government. But yeah, interesting. So thanks so much for Ranjit, for you. I'll circle back to you. Rakshit, okay, we are now at 5:30. I'm sorry, we've already crossed our 1 hour, but the conversation is so interesting that I don't have the heart to say that we need to end quickly. But Rakshit, you and I come from the world of corporate travel, leisure travel. We are the guys who are still standing. I'm surprised we're still standing, but we are. What are you hearing from the corporate customers? What will make them come back on the road? Will it be a hybrid model going forward, work from home and office? Will it be different for different industries? And it's very important to hear your point of view because it also impacts airlines and hotels directly.
Yes, yes, Deepak. We both come from similar worlds. You're a veteran. I'm a novice. That's the only difference. But look, I think the Indian economy is way too heterogeneous to generalize, but I'll try and generalize anyway. So if I divide the corporate into three buckets, three discrete buckets, which is, I'd say, large global multinationals operating in India would be one bucket. Large Indian companies, the flag bearers of Indian industry, would be the second bucket. And I think the life and blood of the Indian economy would be the SMEs, would be the third bucket. And we see very, very different behavior and intent in these three buckets. So the large global multinationals operating in India, for example, have been extremely cautious. Many of them still, most of them, I would argue, still have travel bans in place. And travel's permitted only with CXO approval for, in the most exceptional of circumstances. And I think they're looking for, it's more of a globally coordinated approach, and they're looking for, some form of global consistency in relaxation of these constraints before they let their workforce be mobile. The large Indian companies, what we're seeing is that they're balancing some of their trepidation with pragmatism, right? So and in a lot of them are family-owned conglomerates, and so there's a certain benevolent leadership model there. And so what they're saying is, look, we need to get back to work, but we will work with what we need you to help us enhance the duty of care around our people, so that we can provide them with a greater degree of assurance when they go out and take personal risks for us. And so we worked with our partners, some of whom are on this panel, in order to provide that assurance wrapper and to provide the confidence that's needed. And some of that has to do with the basic hygiene factors associated with travel. Some of it has to do with information provision and transparency and tracking and so on and so forth. But we're starting to see conversations evolve around that. The third bucket actually is the most interesting, because I think that bucket said, look, they can't hang on much further. They need to get back to work. They need to engage with their customers. They need to engage with their organizations. They need to sort their supply chain issues out. And they don't have neither the resources nor the infrastructure to do it remotely. And so they're back in the air, and they're back in hotels and so on and so forth. So I totally, what Kamal said about what he's experienced over the last few weeks totally resonates with us. And what we're finding is that I think it would be fair to say that the lockdown last year and the lockdown this year ended around the same time, which is around the 1st of June, right? And what we're seeing in June is 4x the recovery that we saw last year. So for us to get to this sort of trading level took us till October last year, and we're already there by the end of June. And I'm sure, or at least I'm optimistic that the July trajectory will follow as well. So I think that's what's happening there, and what we're seeing in terms of work from home and work from office. We're seeing a shift in tone and sentiment there. I think 6 months ago, when we were having this conversation, most companies were committed to the idea of extended working from home. And there's been a rather significant shift ever since the vaccination program accelerated. And it's no secret that since, that the private sector has kind of, led from the front when it comes to looking after vaccination programs for their employees and making vaccines available to them. And I think once where we are seeing significant vaccine traction, we're seeing those organizations are actually asking their workers to return to the office as fast as possible. So I think across the client spectrum, most clients are saying, if you are fully vaccinated, then you're expected to be back in office. If you're partially vaccinated, we're going to give you some flexibility. And if you're not vaccinated, then we're going to wait and see, how we get you to that stage. So yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's there's three words for us: vaccination, vaccination, and vaccination. I think that's really what comes across from everybody. Rakshit, thank you so much. I'm now, I know Rupinder has to leave for another meeting outside her office. So I'm going to go real quick. I have two questions which I want to ask each of you, and then I'm going to hand it over to Rupinder. this is a billion-dollar question, or maybe I don't know how many $billion. The best year for all of us was 2019. We all agree to that. When will the business return to 2019? And your quick assumption. Rakshit, why don't you go first? And then we'll go to Ranjit.
The middle of 23.
Okay. Ranjit?
See, without my crystal ball that I usually gaze into, I would say the same. I think I would stick to about Q4 of next year and early Q1 of 23.
Okay. Kerry?
Sorry, had myself on mute again. Those pesky renovations going on upstairs. I have to agree. For me, don't have the crystal ball, but I'm going to say early 2023. Could even see that in Q4 of 2022. Could.
So late 22, early 23. Kamal?
So for domestic travel, I am bullish. This winter could be end of the year or early next year, pre-pandemic level. For international travel, I would say September, October 22.
Okay, you're optimistic. Rohit?
I think we'll see a strong recovery maybe mid of next year, and full recovery by end of next year.
Okay, so 2022 late, early 2023 sounds like you guys are back on the road, yeah? Fantastic. So I'm going to give you all exactly 30 seconds each for your final words of advice to the government or to the industry, and then Rupinder, we will come to you. So Rohit, why don't we start with you?
I think for me, that it's not about advice to the government. It's more about ongoing dialogue. I think, honestly, this is a great opportunity, I'll reiterate, to build Dekho Apna Desh, right? And really be much more thoughtful as an opportunity. Let me give you an example, right? Why should Agra be a day visit destination? It benefits no one.
Yeah.
Right. Now, what is needed in Agra to help the tourists stay 1 or 2 days, right? I think if we just problem solve on such things, I think it gives a multiplier effect to the entire city, right, and economy. And there are so many such opportunities that we can align on, and as a private sector and working with the government, deliver quite seamlessly. So it is ours collectively to lose, as I call it, but lots of opportunity to work together.
Thank you, Rohit. Rakshit?
The only thing I would say is, look, we can take hardship in our stride, right? We've been doing it right through the first Gulf War, the second Gulf War, various busts and booms since, and SARS, and now this. I think for us, what we need is planning certainty. So what we want is a certain predictability and consistency in the drafting and application of rules that govern travel. I think that's the biggest ask from us.
Great. Yeah. Absolutely. Ranjit?
For me, I think, drive vaccinations would be the first thing that I would say. And then digital is the way to go today. And everything has to be around that.
Fantastic. Kamal?
So immediate requirement, and especially to MOT, would be permit vaccinated people to travel freely with no RT-PCR, nothing across the country on an ASAP basis. Let's do it as an app. We've done a travel pass with IATA at an international level, which will go, which is already being pilot run. Hopefully in 2 months, we'll have that. India must participate in that. We are piloting that project. But even before that, within the country, for domestic travel across 29 states, you're doubly vaccinated, that's your green pass, and RT-PCR must also be accepted, because we are a long way off.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. Ease of travel is the key to it. Kerry?
Yeah, look, I couldn't agree more, and I think most of the comments have already been said. And it's not so much advice, but I think it's a collaborative approach, sort of working with this coalition, I guess, if you like, the coalition of the hospital and hospitality and travel industry. And, what we would like to see is technology being used, definitely the vaccination drive, but consistency in message, so that it's not confusing for the consumer for 29 states, whether they don't know whether they can quarantine, they don't quarantine, you need this, you need that. So it needs to have a national consistent message for the consumers. I think that's probably the key.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kerry. It's there. And now I'm going to add my 2 pennies worth for the international market. For me, it would be Incredible India 3.0. That is what needs to be launched. We need to be right ahead in the international market. The government has the budget. They must spend it on a fantastic campaign to bring back the international market to India, which is going to happen very soon. It should be all based on social media. That's how people are going to get attracted to travel here. The government should give us 3 months lead time before they open the destination, so there is enough time for us to go promote, get everybody, give the confidence before people start arriving. And if you are double vaccinated, that's it. You don't need no RT-PCR, you have no test, your visa gets issued, you just travel in and travel out as if there was no COVID. And I think life would be much easier with all of that. So with that, I'm going to request Rupinder to please give her final words for today before we wrap up. Thank you, Rupinder.
Thanks, everyone. I think a lot of points that have come across from all of you as practitioners of the trade are in sync with what we are thinking. And so that's very reassuring, because that's pretty much the way we've been thinking on how to go forward from here. And therefore, plan A, plan B, plan C is vaccine, vaccine, vaccine. And so that is clearly the way forward. And we are happy to therefore be continuously engaged with health to make sure that that remains on track. And India does seem to be moving as per a plan. So I think in the next few months, we are looking at a sizable population being double vaccinated. So that is in fact very, very reassuring for us also. In terms of digital, yes, absolutely. I think that is where the opportunity lies out of the COVID, in how to improve productivities and be at a more cutting edge in terms of service providers as we compete. And I always say that while pandemic, and that is one part of the story, but eventually we are competing with the world in this trade. And therefore we will have to be really up there, and countries are going to be very aggressive post-pandemic also, but even otherwise, if we really want to make use of all the heritage and all the natural assets that we talk about, we will really, really have to be very modern in our approach in terms of the way we run our businesses. So, and on the other part, the learning that has come out of COVID, and thanks for taking it up with passion, Rohit. The Dekho Apna Desh, in fact, that has been such a learning process for all of us. A vertical that was kind of sort of just being taken more in an organic fashion. It was growing, but no one was really looking at it in that tactical a manner that here lay a whole opportunity. And there's a challenge and an opportunity there, because how to make sure that all those Indians that are now traveling within India will not just simply just take a flight and go away. It's wonderful to travel around the world. However, not everybody travels more than maximum 1 or 2 times annually out of India. So for the rest of the times, the long weekends, the times when you are working from home, I think that's where it's a huge opportunity for us to tap into a very aspirational Indian today, wanting to travel, wanting to check out places, going trekking, going cycling, going cruising, doing all kinds of fun activities. And therein also, and Agra, since you mentioned Agra, we did Antaj Agra as part of the Dekho Apna Desh sessions, and there was so much to be learned there. So we did everything in 1 hour session except the Taj, which is always the more obvious thing to do. And I was there in Agra a couple of weeks back, and Taj was locked that day actually. We could not see the Taj, but believe me, we stayed 2 nights. I could have stayed another night too, because we went into the Zardozi workshop and, you know, had a fantastic exposure to the museum. So much to be explored. And indeed, that's where the opportunity should be leveraged by India, not only vis-a-vis us, because when we are looking at these new products, lesser known products, it's not that we are just creating it for the domestic market, but also for all our inbound travelers who are looking for more experiential learning, who are looking at India in its very, very colorful forms, the cuisines, the arts, the crafts, the heritage. Deepak and I, we are working on some stuff on heritage too, and we hope that we can take a lot of things forward on that. So yes, planning definitely required for the current, for the short term in terms of when to open, and giving all of you a reasonable amount of time to create the right pitch, to reach out to your trade and travel partners across the world. And the efforts are on. In fact, as we are speaking, I was just editing a letter that we are writing out to Home and Health to set up an appointment with them. And that's an exercise, of course, we are doing almost every other week formally, and informally it's happening every single day. So let's hope for the best, and let's hope that domestic tourism for now carries on with the same zest as can be seen in Manali and some parts of Uttarakhand. But I'm only crossing my fingers, toes, body cross, that it does not lead to a third phase, because definitely caution, care is needed. So things looking interesting, things looking good, but I think we really have to keep our antennae up there if we really want to leverage and exploit the opportunities that exist for tourism in India. And we are seemingly doing the right things, but I think it's important to remain consistent. It's important to remain disciplined about it, and being very tactical and strategic in how we pitch and what we pitch and where we pitch. So those are some of my learnings from all of you. And thank you very much, Vicky. Thanks, Deepak. And thanks to all the co-panelists for very engaging ideas. I've noted them down. We should probably meet again and work on all these.
Thank you so much, Rupinder. It's been a fantastic 1.5 hours, and I think this is amongst the very interesting discussions that we've had in the last few weeks. I think as everybody has spoken about vaccination, there's been some interesting ideas from Ranjit from what they did away from here, the airline piece, the corporate travel piece, Oyo from Accor. I think each one. Thank you so much to each of you for your time and for sharing your experiences with us. This has been a lovely 1.5 hours. Thank you very much, and thank you on behalf of Vicky for taking the time out. Rupinder, especially to you, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Very nice, very engaging.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.